Welcome to the Rocky Road Podcast, brought to you by Rockbusters, with your host, Dennis Wager. Dennis is a best-selling author and an expert in demolition, rock, and concrete breaking, as well as a professional blaster. He is also president of Rockbusters Incorporated, along with his son, Brian. On the podcast, you'll hear exciting stories of how these challenge types of rock and concrete jobs are done. You learn about the uses of expanding grout and explosive devices. But furthermore, you'll hear about some of the hurdles and struggles entrepreneurs and business owners have had along the way, how they got started, and how they broke through the obstacles and found the path to success. Along with that, some insight for young people and people wanting to get into the industry. So listen in. I hope you enjoy the show. Now, here's Dennis Wager.
Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining in. Appreciate your time. I want to welcome to the show here today, Mark Anthony, all the way from London in the UK, way across the other side of the globe. Welcome to the show, Mark. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah, all very good, thank you. It's the end of my working day today, and it's weekend tomorrow. So, yeah, I'm feeling pretty chipper at the moment.
Yeah, that's always the challenge for me to get used to with the other end of the world's time differences, you know? Like when we're getting up, you guys are going to bed.
Yeah, absolutely. And bed is not far away either, so not too bad at all.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thanks for joining us on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know you got a busy schedule with all that you do, and one of the major things that you do is you produce the Demolition News magazine. If you want to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, we did produce the Demolition News magazine. I've been running the Demolition News website, demolitionnews.com website, for the past 15 years. And there was a demand for a magazine to run off the back of that, which we did run very successfully for about 8 or 9 years. And then COVID came along, and all of a sudden magazines became somewhat problematic. So that led to a fairly significant shift in my career path. I've been a 33-year print journalist, and 3 years ago, almost to the day, I stopped being a print journalist and I became a live streamer and a content creator, and haven't looked back since, which is how our paths crossed, effectively.
Yeah, wow, that's actually very impressive, to go from something that you're used to for all those years to something new, right?
Yeah, well, it was an act of desperation, to be perfectly honest. I'd been at the ConExpo exhibition in Las Vegas, and COVID broke out. And I must admit, we were aware of COVID before we touched down in Las Vegas, but didn't really understand the severity or the repercussions that we were likely to see. And we were in a taxi driving down the Las Vegas Strip, and the announcement came on the radio that the NBA season had been cancelled. And that was kind of a wake-up call. It's like, this just got pretty real, And then by the time I got back to the UK, the printers that we used to produce our magazine had gone into lockdown. The advertising department were on furlough. And I literally had, I had a week's worth of news to deliver from ConExpo, and no way of delivering it. So I'd actually been a guest on a podcast or a video live stream about a week before I went to ConExpo. Thought it was pretty straightforward, and thought, well, I'll do that. And there is actually a podcast. It's hard to find. I've made it hard to find, but there is actually a podcast of me saying on air, I'm going to do this until COVID blows over. So you'll only have to put up with me for about a week, and then it'll all be over.
A week, yeah.
3 years later, I'm still doing it.
We are, right? Yeah. So how did you go about kind of transitioning or learning all the stuff?
Thankfully, there's not a great deal to learn. I initially used, I still use a system called StreamYard, and it's free. So I'd been a guest on somebody else's show, saw how straightforward it was, so downloaded the software and had a go. Called a friend of mine. We'd both come back from ConExpo together, and I called a friend of mine and said, look, this is what I'm going to do. Would you be a guest on my first show? He agreed. We did it, and it was pretty straightforward. And then you start to get a bit fancier. You upgrade the microphone, and you upgrade the lighting and the things that go along. But it was one of the things that surprised me was we've got a big audience. We've got a subscriber base of about 65,000 people on Demolition News. So I was able to tell them that we were going to do a show. But in a lot of ways, the demolition industry is quite conservative and a bit set in its ways. And I was kind of expecting to go live and speak to myself, basically. And the first show we had about 30 people turn up. The second show was about 50 people, and it's just gradually gone and gone and gone to the point where, we're at the point now where I do a daily live show every 10 a.m. every weekday morning UK time.
Wow.
And if I'm literally 30 seconds late, I get an email from the audience saying, "Where are you? What's going on?
Where are you?" Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
like me this morning. What's with the internet? Like, what's wrong with the internet? Why aren't you here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but to the point, I was back in Las Vegas for ConExpo a couple of weeks ago, the latest ConExpo, and even though I told the audience I was going away and I was going to be away for a week, my phone was pinging in the middle of the night Las Vegas time to say, "Well, I've just turned on the computer and you're not here. Where are you?"
Yeah, where are you? That's so cool. Well, congratulations. That's an accomplishment for sure. And I think
it's quite this late in life, I mean, I'm 58 years old. I didn't expect to become a broadcaster anytime soon, but lo and behold, that's where we are.
Yeah, and then maybe you never know. Like 5 years from now, you might have 650,000 people on your show. You just don't know, right?
You never know.
I mean, you look at some of them; they're in the millions of viewers, and so many people watch it.
Again, I mean, your show obviously is going to be very much the same as mine. I'm not looking, would I like 1 million viewers? Of course, I'd like 1 million viewers, but I don't actually need 1 million viewers because Demolition. I mean, here in the UK, and it's a global podcast and a global show, but here in the UK, there are only 550 to 600 demolition contractors. If I get 300 watching on a daily show, I've conquered half the market. I don't need
True.
I don't need millions. A few hundred does me quite nicely. We're well beyond that now, but that's enough.
That's true. One of the things that I've noticed though is like the more that we reach out, the more people from farther around the world kind of tune in, right? Like just before the show this morning, I got a call from a customer in South Africa saying how he's getting things going more and more over there. And it just leads me to think about all the different people that I actually get to connect with. I have a guy in Texas doing a pool excavation in rock. So I'm kind of guiding him step by step how to drill and pour the grout to do this breaking of the rock for the pool. I have another guy over in Haiti that had a crew of guys that were breaking rock in the jungle. And they were just doing it literally by hand. They had like feather and wedges, and they were drilling their holes with a generator and an electric Hilti drill. I don't even think it was a Hilti, it was some other brand of electric drill. And they were doing roads. They were taking rocks out of the jungle and cracking them and breaking them down into rubble and making that rubble into roads through the jungle. And I'm watching, like they're sending me videos, and I'm watching going, wow, I could speed that up.
Definitely.
So they ended up buying a bunch of our product and the tools and the drills and all that stuff. And then what was so cool is I was sitting in a friend of mine's log cabin out in the Sunshine Valley here, which is a really nice area up in the interior a little bit, sitting on their balcony, FaceTiming these guys. There's about 9 guys in the jungle hooking up the air lines to the compressor. They don't know how to start it. And then it's like, well, you see that knob, you pull that's the choke, you pull the choke and then you turn it over. But, for them, it was a big deal. It's like, oh my God, we're getting this high tech equiment here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's sharing.
It is technology that I mean, it's really shrunk the world. I want to talk about your product, obviously, but one of the things that I found most refreshing about my switch of career from magazine to live streaming is, I spent 30 years producing a magazine that I would send out. It would go out into the ether, and unless you spelled somebody's name wrong, you never heard a word. Whereas today, I go on a live show and I've got people interacting, firing me feedback all the time, and the fact that they are seeing the person behind the story, it's or that's presenting the story, it just makes it so much different,
so much better.
I mean, and just to show you just how weirdly engaged our audience is, it is our 500th show on Friday next week.
Oh, cool!
And I had a package arrive from me yesterday morning. One of my viewers has bought me a live on air. Like a neon display to go on the on the wall behind me.
Oh, how
he's
cool
donated that to the show just because he loves the show.
Awesome, that's amazing. Yeah, that's so good. I mean, you never know, all those little niceties kind of show up, right? That's what I enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just thinking the same thing too. I have a person in Australia that I deal with that makes saws for excavators, and then believe it or not, I have a girl in Scotland who I connected with on Instagram, and she just posted last night, "Oh hey, I'm in urgent need of a saw for my excavator. Can anybody help me?" And I'm like, okay, well, Australia, Scotland, sure, okay, no problem.
Yeah,
call me.
They're almost next door to each other.
Almost next door. Yeah, me over here, it's like a triangle. It's easy, right? We can hook you guys up. But yeah, so what we have, what we do is the expanding grout, and we do Royex, the low explosive. We talked a little bit about that. So what's really nice about the expanding grout is it's so easy to use. You just mix it with water, you drill holes and pour it into concrete or rock and let it set overnight or over the day or two, and it expands and cracks all your rock or concrete apart. And as you know, we're trying to get our market expanded over anywhere that we can. I eventually would love to be a global company so that we could supply everybody everywhere. So I'm thinking like the way to approach it is just kind of start place by place, wherever we can fit in.
No, absolutely.
So,
Well, I mean, I've had some experience with expanding grout, not personally, but I've seen it in operation in years gone by. But I was talking to somebody literally yesterday. We've got a bunch of, we've already got rid of most of our fossil fueled power stations here in the UK now through various demolition means, but we're now working on some of our older nuclear power stations. And those are going to require some pretty fancy demolition techniques, I think. And expanding grout should certainly be in the mix there, I would have thought. Obviously, there are objections to actual explosives because, there is the threat of throwing fly rock and potentially radioactive material about the place. We don't want to be doing that. But one of the methods they're looking at is pyrotechnics, which is obviously sort of low explosive. Yeah. But then the expanding grout is kind of the next step back from that. Yes, it does take a little bit longer than perhaps a pyrotechnic, although the methodology is much the same. But, you've got no danger of fly rock. You've got no danger of allowing radioactive material to spill out anywhere. It just seems like a perfect product for a perfect time,
Yeah, exactly. And we've done a lot of work here with the nuclear lab in Ontario. We have Canadian Nuclear Labs here, and they've done a lot of projects with it. They've gone through lots of walls that are 2 foot thick of concrete. And it's actually quite easy. Like now we also have a device we call the Grout Whiz, where you're able to bolt plate onto the wall. It allows you to use the grout horizontally. So you just have a little grout pump, and you pump the grout through the fitting into the hole, and then you have a valve that you close and it caps it off so it can set. So we use that in tunneling and things you can actually drill perfectly horizontal or even at an upwards angle if you want as well. So that's an option. So we're kind of conquering all of these, what used to be roadblocks and making it more and more applicable to different applications.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I know I know the global demolition industry, but certainly here in the UK, we are a pretty conservative bunch. In some ways, I think when demolition contractors seize upon an idea that they now believe in, they're very quick to do that, but they take a lot of convincing in the first place.
To change, yeah.
And I agree,
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the challenges with people that have tried to offer the expanding grout solution here in the past. They've been here for 6 months. They've given it a try. Maybe they've done a couple of demonstrations, and then they've gone away again. And in the nicest possible way, the expanding grout solution, when you're comparing it to explosives, pyrotechnics, and possibly heavy equipment, it's a horses for courses. You might show that expanding grout to somebody that doesn't need it for the next 3 years. But in 3 years' time, he comes to the right job and the right application, and all of a sudden, it's who was that guy? Dennis. Get Dennis on the line. I have the perfect opportunity.
Exactly, and I think that's exactly the way it is. And people always kind of start off with thinking about blasting first because dynamite's been around for a million years, but then they come to quickly realize like, oh, that's very expensive. It's very regulated. There's so much insurance requirements. And there's so much, risk, and everybody wants to mitigate all that risk nowadays. So that's one type of, potential customer. But the other customer is the guy that's actually sitting on a chipping hammer or a jackhammer all day going, why is this concrete 2 feet thick? And why am I sweating so much? And is there an easier way?
Yeah. Again, I mean, I think one of the challenges that with a methodology like this is you don't appear to be doing a great deal with expanding grout.
Yeah.
You know, even if you are sweating and you're hot and you're perspiring and everything else on a machine, and you're packing away with a breaker, at least you feel like you're doing something. Whereas with this, you drill it, and then you possibly go away and have a cup of coffee for a few hours, and,
exactly.
or possibly even a day, and then you come back. And I think convincing clients of the sense and the viability of that is, they do like their big explosions. Never mind the 6 months that went into the preparation. They like to turn up on sort of 6 o'clock one morning, press a button, it all falls down, and everyone's happy.
Yeah, I agree. There's something to be said for the instant gratification because you can see the results. But we like to say it's like your free night shift. You know, they go to work, or it goes to work when you're sleeping, or playing with your kids or having a beer. It's continuing your day for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you come in the morning and it's cracked, and then much easier to come out, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely right.
Yeah. So what other kind of jobs do you see being popular, or what is happening over in the London area now for work?
To be honest, it's not. We have a bit of a challenge here in the UK at the moment. We've really bought into the whole environmental thing, which again kind of plays into your hands to a degree. We've got a bit of an environmental lobby here in the UK that is really gaining momentum and gaining a lot of traction as well. And there is basically a move to try to effectively outlaw demolition. Because of concerns over embodied carbon. So we've already expended the carbon to actually put a building together, and it's now occupied. What do we do with it when it's over and done with? Well, in years gone by, it was a case of, well, let's tear it down and build something bigger in its footprint. But there is now a real active move now to say that's the last resort. What we should be doing is refurbishing it and trying to make amends. I think anybody that understands demolition realises that that's not as straightforward as the environmentalists would have us all believe. And I think they've overlooked the fact that demolition is actually a key contributor of secondary aggregates and that kind of thing. They're effectively, in terms of construction, demolition sits at the very heart of the circular economy. It's constantly evolving previous materials and stuff.
100%.
I think that's been missed. But places like London, I mean, we had one, we've had a couple actually, but one in particular, somebody had proposed an idea of a new tower in the city of London, kind of like an observation tower, but a tourist attraction and everything else. And it was basically canned because of the concerns over embodied carbon.
Wow.
So we've got a bit of a challenge. And I in some ways, I mean, despite the fact that I love demolition and I'm very protective of it, I do think there is a lot to be said, not necessarily for that argument, but I think the reaction to it, I think it might force demolition contractors to take a bit of a step back and say, okay, can we do this a better way? Can we do this a more environmentally friendly way? Obviously, as it stands at the moment, all the heavy equipment we're using is diesel-based. Diesel has obviously an emissions issue. Explosives, is that necessary? You wouldn't do that in London anyway because everything's on top of everything else. So you've now got to start to explore different avenues. And maybe those different avenues lead, they beat a path to you and the sort of product you're offering.
Yeah. What do you think about electric? Do you see things shifting to electric machines over there?
It's been a really strange one. I mean, I chart equipment very, very closely. I've been following construction and demolition equipment for 30 plus years. And when electric equipment first arrived, or when it was first shown to everybody, everyone, this is fantastic. How great is this? It's silent, no emissions. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
We are now getting the backlash. We have a lot of concerns over what becomes of those machines when they reach the end of their natural life. We've got concerns about what happens to the batteries when they reach the end of their life. We've also got a situation here in the UK where our national grid, our electric grid, is basically at capacity already. So if we suddenly had an influx of new draws on that, I'm not saying that, even if we had 10,000 electric excavators sold tomorrow, it's not going to bring the grid to a halt. It's not going to turn anybody's lights off, but it does put additional strain. And I think the bigger concern is, where is that electricity coming from? If you're in the wilds of Canada and you've got wind power and solar power and hydroelectric, that's fantastic. We don't have that. And our nuclear power stations, we've got a couple under construction at the moment. They're still 20 years away. So we're still drawing some of our energy from fossil fuels. Is fossil fuels to generate electricity for a supposedly clean machine really the way forward? So my personal belief is hydrogen will be the way forward. It's a little way off, but I think hydrogen will be the actual solution.
Okay, I could see that. It's interesting because it's almost like, the two extremes, right? And where is the happy medium?
Well, I think the happy medium, funnily enough, I think that will define itself in terms of the size of the equipment. I think electric equipment will be fine up to 4, 5, maybe even 10 tons. So mini excavators, compact track loaders, and that kind of thing. But I think at the top end,
the bigger stuff,
from 10 tons. Sure. Having said that, I mean, the likes of Volvo have already got a 20-ton electric excavator, so that you can go bigger, but it seems like such a strange thing to draw upon. But one of the guys at JCB told me recently, we're a slightly odd industry in that we traditionally take the fuel to the machine.
Right.
When you take your car to the fuel.
To the fuel, yeah.
In the construction industry, the demolition industry, quarrying, mining, you take the fuel to the machine.
To the machine, yeah.
Electric, you can't do that. You've actually got to take the machine and put it by a generator or a charger or whatever it might be. And I think that's possibly too much of a mindset shift. Whereas hydrogen, you can actually take the hydrogen, much as you would a diesel Bowser, pull it up to the machine, plug it in, and away you go.
Away you go. Yeah, that's a good point too. I have a friend of mine in Boston, and he does a lot of work in New York as well as Boston, and he sells the electric dumpers, eco equipment, and he's doing very well. He has a fleet of Brocs and the dumpers and electric mini loaders, and they do like so much concrete restoration jobs, so they can get in. It's all electric, so they can pour the concrete encasements around columns. And then all the demo work, they hammer it out, load it into the buggies, and then the buggies actually lift up. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they lift up and they tip into a bin. So you put a bin on the ground and they load it. So it's really changing, the landscape there. And it's, that's driven by emissions because, indoors you don't want emissions for very long. And this allows you to kind of work.
I think that's one of the areas where I think we need a bit of a mindset shift. One of the key areas of demolition, as you would know, is what we refer to here in the UK as the soft strip. So before you actually do the heavy demolition, you go in and you take out plasterboard and timber and glass and plastics and all that. You basically strip the building back to its bare bones.
Yeah.
That part of the demolition process has always traditionally been done manually. So you're sending people in to rip it out. And a lot of, not so much the fatalities, thankfully, there's not too many of them these days. But most of the injuries these days are in that area.
Yeah.
Because you have actually got guys in there, they're getting cuts and scratches, stuff in their eyes, and all that kind of thing. You could mechanize that. And electric machines are the way to mechanize that because you've got no concern over exhaust gases in enclosed spaces and that kind of thing. It's silent. You could work next to a hospital. You could work in a hospital if necessary. All of that is dead possible. But it does need that mindset shift, I think.
I think so too. And that's actually one of the very first jobs that I ever did with Expanding Grout was a job at the Vancouver General Hospital. We took out a big, thick concrete machine pedestal. I think it was about 5 feet thick and 10 by 10 square. And it was right above the operating room. And they didn't want to shut down the operating room because it was busy. So we went in and drilled our holes. We actually just core drilled them because that's quiet. And then we poured the grout and then went home. And the next day we came in and it was all broken. It was a split pour between the slab and the concrete pedestal. So it just came apart at the split. And we just, basically shoveled up the rubble, put it in the wheelbarrows and loaded her out through the elevators down into the bins. And the guys in the operating room never even knew we were there.
Yep. Oddly enough, the first time I ever saw Expanding Grout in action was in a hospital in London. So
yeah,
and it is, and I think that's one of the key areas to consider. That was very much client led. The client being the hospital or the health authority in that instance. They want a solution that doesn't upset their patients, that doesn't shut down the operating theatre, that doesn't make a lot of noise and dust. And they then go to a demolition contractor and say, okay, well, this is what we need to do. but we can't have noise, we can't have dust, and we can't have vibration. Fix that problem for us.
Fix the problem. Yeah, exactly. And then even when you apply that same method into like restaurants and hotels and things like that, like what hotel is going to want to shut down because of noise and vibration, and what customer is going to want to be trying to, stay in their room of a fancy hotel, or couldn't even imagine being at a day in a spa with, somebody jackhammering on the walls with the LT chipping out concrete, right? You just wouldn't happen. But, you need the solutions. And I think you're exactly right. It just needs to kind of get to the mainstream. It's just really the knowledge base to show people how to use these different ways and different methods. It's just like, if you know every day in your back pocket is a drill and some grout, when these jobs come up, you can drill and pour the grout and it'll crack it. And you can apply that into other jobs, such as, doing interior demo at restaurants or at hotels. You would never even imagine going to a day at the spa with somebody trying to chip out concrete, on the floor above you, right? Like, it just isn't going to happen. But to provide a solution where the business owner doesn't lose revenue because they're renovating, right? So they don't want to lose that customer that's spending X amount of hundreds of dollars or pounds in your case, going to the spa, or they don't want to lose those guests in the hotel, right?
No, so absolutely.
If you're able to you kind of, coordinate with that and benefit them both.
I think that's the core to your business, really. It's offering demolition contractors an additional tool for their toolkit. Some of them will have explosives, some of them will have heavy equipment, some of them will do high reach demolition, some of them will do top down demolition, whatever it might be. Yours is an additional tool, and when the application requires it, be it a hospital or a restaurant or something a little more challenging like a nuclear power station, you just break out the most appropriate tool, which may well be the expanding grout.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think if everybody gets in the habit of, let's have a few boxes on the shelf, and then when something comes up, we have it and we're ready to go. And so that's really kind of what I'm up to with trying to get out your way. And then if we can, we're also, as you know, trying to put together a network of dealers to stock and resell the grout, so that people can have a place to go. They have somebody to kind of ask questions to, and that person can help them, guide them through their job.
There, you just mentioned the word stock there. One of the things that, funny enough, this came up in conversation just the other day. We were talking about explosives, and proper explosives have a shelf date or a sell-by date.
Yeah.
After a certain time, they are no longer considered functional. Whereas this, like you say, you can put some on the shelf. You might not use it for the next year, but when you need it, it's right there.
Exactly. Yeah, it does have a 3-year shelf life. So anytime, even after 3 years, it does still work. It just is a little bit slower. It doesn't have the same strength. But that's what I would suggest. That's what we always do. We have some in stock, and it's always just trying to maintain the stock so that you have enough. And for us, because we supply a lot, so it's always a juggle, because some guys are buying like big amounts, and some people are buying a box or two. But that's always growing. And I think the bigger that we get, the bigger that everybody gets kind of globally, the bigger that the whole network will become, and it'll even out and become easier. But that's the goal. And then I'm really happy to work together with people to show them all these different ways. And if it's a fit and it's helpful for them, great. And then if they find a better way, that's great. Yeah.
Well, should you ever organise a demonstration right here in the UK, you can consider me one of your guests, because I'll certainly come along and watch it in action.
Well, there you go. We should plan that. We'll talk about that a bit down the road and make that a goal.
Awesome. Look forward to it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us today, Mark. That was great. I really appreciate your time. And again, enjoy your day or your evening, I should say. And thanks for being here.
The pleasure was all mine. Good to speak to you, Dennis.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you would like to be a guest on a future episode and tell us your story, visit our website at www.rockbusters.com. If you have a project and would like to learn more about our products, or if you're interested in partnering with us and becoming a distributor, give us a call. Thanks again. We appreciate your support.